Chapter 1. The Intrusion. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, flipping through a stack of baby name books. Her face was a mask of concentration, her brow furrowed in thought. Mark entered the room, a concerned look on his face. "What are you doing, Sarah?" he asked, leaning against the doorway. "I'm trying to find the perfect name for our baby," Sarah replied, not looking up from the book. Mark walked over and sat down next to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone, you know. We can choose a name together," Sarah sighed, closing the book and looking up at him. "I know, Mark. It's just, your mom has been on my case about it. She keeps suggesting names that I don't like, and it's starting to get to me." Mark's expression darkened. "I'll talk to her, Sarah. I'll make sure she backs off." Before Sarah could respond, the doorbell rang. Mark got up to answer it, and Sarah heard his mother's voice in the hallway. She tensed, knowing that their conversation was about to take a turn. "Linda, what are you doing here?" Mark asked, sounding surprised. "I just wanted to stop by and see how my grandchild is doing," Linda replied, breezing past Mark and into the kitchen. Sarah forced a smile.
I'm fine, Linda.
"The baby is fine." Linda looked around the kitchen, her eyes lingering on the baby name books. "Have you chosen a name yet?" Sarah felt her frustration bubbling to the surface. "Not yet, Linda. We're still deciding." Linda nodded, but Sarah could see the disappointment in her eyes. "Well, if you need any suggestions, you know I'm here to help." Mark stepped in, trying to diffuse the tension. "Thanks, Mom, but Sarah and I want to choose a name that's meaningful to us." Linda's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "Of course, dear. I just want what's best for you and the baby." As Linda turned to leave, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of intrusion that lingered in the air. She knew that Linda meant well, but her constant interference was starting to wear on her. And as she looked at Mark, she wondered if their relationship could withstand the strain of his mother's overbearing presence. Chapter 2. The Unwanted Advice. As Sarah's pregnancy progresses, Linda's interference in Sarah and Mark's lives becomes more pronounced. She starts by offering what she believes to be helpful advice, but it quickly becomes clear that she is overstepping her boundaries. One evening, Sarah and Mark invite Linda over for dinner to celebrate Sarah's birthday. As they sit down to eat, Linda begins to comment on everything from Sarah's choice of prenatal vitamins to the color they've painted the nursery. "I hope you're taking the right vitamins, dear," Linda says, peering at Sarah over her glasses. "You want to make sure you're giving the baby everything it needs." Sarah forces a smile, trying to keep the peace. "Don't worry, Linda. I've been taking care of myself and the baby." Linda nods, but then adds, "And have you thought about what you'll do about work after the baby comes? It might be best for you to stay home and focus on being a mother." Sarah's smile falters, and she exchanges a look with Mark. "Actually, we've talked about it, and we've decided that I'll go back to work part-time after the baby is born," Sarah says, trying to assert herself. Linda's expression hardens. "Well, I hope you know what you're doing. Being a mother is a full-time job, you know." The tension at the table mounts as Linda continues to offer unwanted advice and criticism. Sarah tries to remain polite, but inside, she's seething. Mark can sense the rising tension and tries to defuse the situation. "Linda, we appreciate your concern, but Sarah and I have everything under control. We'll make the decisions that are best for our family," Mark says firmly. Linda bristles at his words, but before she can respond, Sarah stands up, her patience wearing thin. "Linda, I appreciate that you care about us, but we need to set some boundaries. This is our family, and we need to make our own decisions." Linda's face flushes with anger, but she holds her tongue. After an awkward silence, she makes an excuse to leave, and the evening ends on a tense note. As Sarah and Mark clean up after dinner, they talk about how to handle Linda's interference moving forward. They both agree that they need to set firmer boundaries and assert themselves more confidently. They know it won't be easy, but they're determined to protect their growing family from outside interference. Chapter 3. The Escalation. As Sarah's pregnancy progresses, so does Linda's interference in Sarah and Mark's lives. Linda begins to take over the planning of the baby's nursery, insisting on specific decorations and furniture that Sarah doesn't like. Sarah tries to voice her opinions, but Linda dismisses her ideas, claiming she knows best. One evening, Sarah and Mark sit down to discuss the nursery decorations. Sarah expresses her frustration with Linda's controlling behavior, feeling like she has no say in her own child's upbringing. "I just don't understand why she's doing this," Sarah says, tears of frustration welling up in her eyes. "I want to be able to make decisions about our child, but she's constantly undermining me." Mark puts a comforting hand on Sarah's shoulder. "I know, honey. I'll talk to my mom and try to get her to back off. This is our child, and we should be able to make these decisions together." The next day, Mark confronts Linda about her behavior. "Mom, I appreciate your help and input, but Sarah and I need to be able to make decisions about our child. We value your opinion, but ultimately, these choices are ours to make." Linda is taken aback by Mark's words. She had only wanted to help, but she realizes she may have overstepped her boundaries. "I'm sorry, Mark. I just want what's best for you and Sarah and the baby. I'll try to be more mindful of your feelings in the future." Despite Linda's apology, tensions continue to rise between Sarah and Linda. Sarah feels like she's constantly walking on eggshells around her mother-in-law, afraid to speak up for fear of causing more conflict. Chapter 4. The Breaking Point. As Sarah's due date approached, the tension between her and Linda continued to grow. Linda's interference had become increasingly intrusive, and Sarah was struggling to maintain her composure. One afternoon, Sarah was preparing the nursery when Linda arrived unannounced, carrying bags full of baby clothes and accessories. "I thought these would be perfect for the baby's room," Linda said cheerfully, placing the bags on the floor. Sarah forced a smile, but inside, she was seething. "Thanks, Linda. But we've already chosen the decor for the nursery." Linda's smile faltered. "Oh, I see. Well, I'm sure we can find a place for these somewhere else." Sarah felt her patience wearing thin. "Linda, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I need you to respect our decisions as parents. This is our baby, and we want to make these choices together." Linda's expression hardened. "I'm just trying to help, Sarah. I want what's best for my grandchild." Sarah took a deep breath, trying to keep her voice calm. "I know you do, Linda. But Mark and I need to be the ones to make these decisions. We need to establish boundaries." Linda's eyes narrowed. "Boundaries? Is that what you're calling it? Trying to keep me out of your lives?" Sarah shook her head.
No, Linda.
"We just need you to respect our choices as parents. We value your input, but we need to be the ones to make the final decisions." Linda stood up, her face flushed with anger.
Fine, Sara.
"If that's how you want it, then maybe I should just stay out of your lives completely." With that, Linda stormed out of the nursery, leaving Sarah feeling a mix of relief and guilt. She knew she had to stand up for herself and her family, but she also didn't want to completely alienate Linda. Later that evening, Sarah sat down with Mark to talk about what had happened. She could see the conflict weighing heavily on him, torn between his loyalty to his wife and his love for his mother. "Mark, I don't want to come between you and your mother," Sarah began, her voice soft. "But we need to establish boundaries for the sake of our family." Mark took her hand, his eyes filled with love and understanding. "I know, Sarah. I've been struggling with this too. But you're right. We need to put our family first." As they talked, they came up with a plan to sit down with Linda and have a frank discussion about boundaries and respect. They hoped that by setting clear expectations, they could prevent further conflict and create a more harmonious relationship with Linda moving forward. Chapter 5: The Breaking Point. As Sarah's due date drew near, the tension between her and Linda reached a boiling point. Linda's interference had become unbearable, and Sarah felt like she was constantly walking on eggshells in her own home. Mark tried to mediate, but he struggled to balance his loyalty to his wife and his desire to keep his mother happy. One evening, Sarah sat down with Mark to talk. "Mark, I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Your mother's constant interference is driving me crazy. I feel like I have no say in my own life." Mark looked at her, his expression pained. "I know, Sarah. I know she can be difficult, but she's my mother. I don't want to upset her." Sarah felt a surge of frustration. "But what about me, Mark? What about our marriage? Your mother is tearing us apart, and you're just letting her." Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know what to do, Sarah. I love you, but I also love my mother. I don't want to choose between you." Sarah felt a pang of sadness. "I'm not asking you to choose, Mark. I just need you to stand up for me, to set some boundaries with your mother. Otherwise, I don't know if I can stay in this marriage." Mark looked at her, realization dawning in his eyes. "I understand, Sarah. I'll talk to my mother. I'll make sure she knows that she can't continue to interfere in our lives like this." The next day, Mark sat down with Linda to have a heart-to-heart conversation. He explained to her how her behavior was affecting his marriage and Sarah's well-being. Linda listened, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, Mark. I never realized how much I was hurting you and Sarah," she said, her voice filled with regret. "I just want what's best for you." Mark nodded, understanding his mother's intentions, but also recognizing the need for boundaries. "I know, Mom, and I appreciate your love and concern. But Sarah and I need to make our own decisions, even if they're different from what you would choose." Linda wiped away her tears, a look of determination in her eyes. "I understand, Mark. I'll try to be more mindful of boundaries in the future. I don't want to lose you or Sarah." As Sarah's due date approached, the atmosphere in the household began to change. Linda respected the boundaries that had been set, and Sarah felt like she could finally breathe again. The experience had brought them all closer together, and as they awaited the arrival of the newest member of their family, they knew that they could face whatever challenges came their way, as long as they faced them together. Chapter 6: The Confrontation. As Sarah's due date approached, the tension in the household reached a boiling point. Linda's interference had become unbearable for Sarah, and Mark could no longer ignore the strain it was putting on their marriage. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Linda began criticizing Sarah's choice of baby names, suggesting that they should follow a family tradition instead. Sarah, already on edge from the constant criticism, snapped. "Linda, I've had enough," Sarah exclaimed, slamming her fork down on the table. "I appreciate your input, but this is our baby, not yours. We'll choose the name that feels right for us." Linda's eyes widened in shock. "But Sarah, I only want what's best for my grandchild," she protested. Mark, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. "Mom, we appreciate your love and concern, but Sarah is right. We need to make decisions as a family, and that includes respecting our choices." Linda looked between them, hurt and confused. "I'm just trying to help," she said, her voice trembling. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "I know you are, Linda, but your constant interference is causing more harm than good. We need you to respect our boundaries." Linda nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Sarah, Mark. I didn't realize I was overstepping. I'll try to do better." The tension in the room eased slightly, but Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. Setting boundaries with Linda would be an ongoing process, one that would require patience and understanding from all sides. Over the next few weeks, Linda made a concerted effort to respect Sarah and Mark's boundaries. She still offered advice and support, but she did so in a more respectful manner, and Sarah and Mark appreciated the effort. As Sarah's due date drew nearer, the family came together to prepare for the arrival of the baby. The conflict with Linda had brought them closer together, and Sarah felt grateful to have such a supportive family by her side. As Sarah went into labor, Linda was there, holding her hand and offering words of encouragement. And when their baby finally arrived, Sarah and Mark knew that they were ready to face whatever challenges parenthood brought them, together as a family.